In today's video, we are discussing how to save for your child's education in South Africa. We are going to take a look at the investment vehicles that are available for saving for education in South Africa and do some interesting calculations to observe which vehicles are likely to enable you to achieve your education investment objective. You are watching the Financial Metaverse. As you well know, the COVID-19 pandemic has altered the lives of many South Africans financially, which has put an additional strain on saving for education for many families. The costs of education have also soared over the past decade. And although many educational institutions have revised their fee structures due to the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as forced shifts to online learning, they are likely to return to pre-pandemic levels when things return back to normal and demand for education returns. It is estimated that if your child started grade R in 2017, you can expect to have paid between 1.3 to 3 million rand in educational costs, depending of course on whether they attended a public or a private institution. The data from Stats SA shows just how much these fees have increased. Primary school fees increased by 7.3% in 2020 compared to 6.9% in 2019. And those for high schools increased by 7.6% compared to 6.9% for the same period. And meanwhile, fees for tertiary institutions climbed by 4.7% compared with 2019's increase of 6.2%. And so much for fees must fall, eh? This obviously means that each year is going to be costing a whole lot more to send a child to school or university in South Africa. Watch these figures as they illustrate this. As a parent, you naturally want your child to be given the best opportunity to have quality schooling so that they can have the best opportunity to succeed later in life. This simply means that you now need to make more room in your budget to cater for the rising costs of education. And boy, do I know this as a parent of 5 young children. And understandably, this may seem overwhelming given the context of these challenging economic times. However, if you start saving as soon as possible, even if it's with a small amount, that start will enable you to benefit from the power of compound interest over the long term. This ultimately increases your opportunity to benefit from long-term gains. Now let's take a look at the investment vehicles that are available for saving for education in South Africa. This is a high-level discussion. We're not going to get into detailed analysis and description of the features, benefits of the different vehicles. However, if you're interested in me making a separate video on these different vehicles, which explains the technicalities of each vehicle, please leave a comment in the section below, and if there's enough interest, I'll consider making a separate video. Investment vehicle number 1. Unit trust. Most financial planning professionals view unit trust as the best investment vehicle to utilize towards saving towards education for a child. In the long term, returns from unit trust investments are consistently higher than those generated from cash savings or those generated by educational policies. A unit trust investment provides a better opportunity to generate inflation-beating gains over the long term. However, those returns are not guaranteed. There are thousands of different unit trust investments to choose from, and each unit trust is suited to your particular objectives and your individual risk profile. One of the disadvantages of investing in a unit trust, however, is that they are very flexible and one can access funds at a very short notice. Another disadvantage is that unit trust investments are not tax exempt unless they are part of a tax-free investment wrapper. However, a relatively significant part of your interest gains are tax exempt. The next investment vehicle is the Fundisa fund. If you can only afford relatively small amounts but still want to save towards a child's education, then this vehicle would probably be a suitable one. This vehicle stems from a collaboration between the Association for Investments and Savings South Africa, ASISA, the government, and certain private financial institutions. The Fundisa fund is basically a unit trust investment with a much lower risk. The minimum monthly contribution is 40 Rand. The fund is essentially subsidized in that an additional 25% of everything that you save annually is added into your investment. This bonus, however, is capped at 600 Rand per annum. This vehicle is intended for households that earn 180,000 Rand per annum or less. but higher income earners are allowed to invest on behalf of an underprivileged child. The next vehicle is insurance policies. If you find it difficult to resist the temptation to dip into your savings funds, consider using an insurance policy. A policy's investment term is fixed, usually a minimum term of 5 years up to a maximum term of 15 years. During the first 5 years, the access to the funds is restricted to 1 withdrawal and 1 in disinvestments. However, there's also heavy penalties for withdrawing funds during that period, which is a disincentive for breaking that commitment to save. Now, these insurance policies, or educational plans as they are sometimes referred to, are essentially endowment policies, which are governed by Section 54 of the Long-Term Insurance Act. And this means they have 4 fundamental characteristics. 1, they limit your ability to access funds. 2, they limit your ability to add additional funds into the investment. 3, they allow you to nominate a beneficiary, which means if you as a policy owner pass on, the funds can be paid directly to your nominated beneficiary. And 4, the proceeds of the investment are paid tax-free in your hand. I'm not going to elaborate on the technicalities of what that means, but if you're interested in me doing so, please comment in the section below and I'll consider making a separate video to explain the technicalities of these investment vehicles. Furthermore, the high administrative costs of this investment vehicle is a major deterrent, particularly to lower income earners. Moreover, the cost of this kind of vehicle includes insurance fees which cover the risk of death or disability to the policy owner, such that if the policy owner were to pass on, the monthly premium will continue to be paid by the insurer until maturity, so that the objective of the plan is still achieved. The next investment vehicle to consider is property. Now, you can buy a property such as a townhouse or a flat with the intention of letting it out or selling it for a profit in order to fund your child's education. Now, this investment vehicle requires far more skill set, particularly in the context of this economic climate, and especially here in South Africa where tenants have superior rights. But if you're considering this as an investment vehicle, always aim for a property that has low costs, such as the levies, the rates and taxes, and the overall maintenance of the property. However, if you don't like the idea of owning a property and managing a tenant and all the legalities that go with that, then you should consider investing in listed properties. Now, these are shares or unit trusts that have exposure in properties such as apartment buildings, shopping centers or malls, or big office complexes. And the last vehicle that we'll discuss is a tax-free savings account. Now, this vehicle was initiated as part of a drive to encourage South Africans to save. Now, the advantage with this vehicle is that the returns on the growth that you make is not taxed. It's tax-free, as the name suggests. However, there's a limit in terms of the amount that you can contribute into this vehicle, which is currently 33,000 per annum or 500,000 in your lifetime. This investment vehicle is a good option for those who have a long-term investment time horizon, at least 5 years or longer, have at least 500 Rand a month to save towards their child's education. This investment vehicle is also very flexible, as you can increase or decrease your contributions, add ad hoc lump sums into it at any time, pause, stop or start at any point in time, or even access the funds as and when you wish. Now, equities or shares usually deliver the most superior long-term inflation-beating returns when compared to other traditional asset classes. As a long-term investor, you should be looking at investment vehicles that can at least deliver 10% compounded interest per annum in order to offset the impact of inflation. If you are not a professional investor or simply don't have the time to learn the skill of investing, or are simply not yet prepared to put in the time and effort to learn how to invest for yourself, then the best alternative is to look at unit trust investments or other investment alternatives such as exchange-traded funds, which are found in many major trading platforms such as Easy Equities, and traditional investment institutions such as the likes of Sanlam, Old Mutual, and so on. These investment vehicles are regulated by law to invest in a range of securities in order to minimize the risk of capital loss using the principle of diversification. Besides investing in shares, you should look at investing in other securities such as different kinds of bonds, commodities such as gold, silver, cash, and more recently, cryptocurrencies. The manner in which you allocate your capital towards these different asset classes is the biggest factor in delivering the kind of returns that will allow you to achieve your investment objectives. So we've already established that the cost of public education by year 2030 would be around 50,000 per annum for a public school. So if we are needing to pay 50,000 per year, that means to fund the entire high school career of a child would cost in the region of 300,000 if we factor in the impact of inflation over the 5-year period. Now, for the purpose of this video, we're going to keep these calculations very simple. So the scenario we're going to use is that your child is in grade R at the moment, and we're wanting to save for their high school education, which would be in 7 years' time. We've already established that by year 2030, which is the time where your child would be starting high school, the fees for a public school would be in the region of 50,000 per annum. And if we want to be able to save enough to fund the entire high school education, we would need to have roughly 300,000. Because for the 5 years of the high school career, we would be paying 50,000 per year, which would be $250,000, and factoring in the impact of inflation over the 5 years, we would need roughly 300,000. So going with that as a calculation, let us see what we have. So as we can see, if we want to generate a return of 300,000 in 7 years' time, according to this calculator, we are going to need 2,200, just over 2,200 Rand per month if we are increasing that annually with inflation, or just over 2,600 a month with no increases in order to reach our goal. And we know for the average middle income family, this is not realistic. It's not feasible to be able to put that amount in just for education purposes, because we have so many things that are competing in our budget. For instance, we want to save for retirement. We want to save for a new home or to improve our home. We want to save for a car. We want to save for a holiday. There's a lot. There are many other competing demands on our budget other than this goal here, and we may have more than one child, so we certainly won't be able to utilize all of this money just for this goal. So we are faced with a challenge here, because if we are using the traditional asset classes, which this calculation is based on using the traditional asset class, which is typically a unit trust investment fund, which if we look at the commonly utilized investment funds like an Alan Gray Balance Fund, if we look at the returns over a 10-year period, and it's good when we are analyzing these kinds of investment vehicles like unit trust funds to look at the long-term track record of performance, because that can tell you what the fund performs in different market cycles. So we can see there that the fund is generated on average over 10 years 10.1%, which is the fund, and it's performed slightly better than the benchmark at 9.6%. But this is before, advisor fees and so on are taken into account. So this calculation is actually very accurate at 8% per annum, because if you take the impact of advisory fees and other fees that are applicable, you'd probably end up on a net return of 8% per annum. So it is clear that if we don't have this amount of money, the chances of achieving this goal are very, very slim. We could improve our likelihood by perhaps adding lump sum ad hoc payments into the investment each time we receive an annual bonus or some windfall capital. But again, we have competing demands on our income and not just this goal. But let's look at a different scenario, or let's look at this calculation a different way. Let's say, the maximum that we can contribute towards this investment is 1,000 Rand per month. We are starting on zero, so your child is in grade R, you're going to start this investment, let's say this month you're going to be starting on zero, the interest rates or the return that we can expect, as we have determined, if you're using like a typical balance fund, would be 10% less the fees, roughly 8%. You could look at a different balance fund, which is also quite popular. It's Coronation. And Coronation's returns would be more or less the same as that of slightly more than the Alan Gray, just literally a percentage more. So let's say we use Coronation, and Coronation can give us, let's say, 9%, so slightly better than Alan Gray, and we have a maximum of 1,000 Rand a month. And you can use this calculator from this site. Just copy the link that I've used here, and I can paste it in the description below. So, and we're going to be doing monthly deposits of 1,000 Rand at the beginning of each period, and we're going to be increasing this by inflation at 10% annually. And let's see how much capital we are likely going to end up with after 7 years. Roughly, half of what we need. We require 300,000, so, we'll only have half of that in 7 years' time. Now, this is a challenge. How do we overcome this scenario, this situation? Like I said, we can make additional contributions when we do have extra cash, ad hoc lump sums we can add in. But still, we are not likely to, get close to the 300,000 that we need. Which means the options are this, that you are not going to have the kind of money that you are required to take your child to the ideal school that you'd like to take them to. And this is just a public school, by the way. So this is a challenge. And how do we overcome this? The other option, we've already said that at 1,000 Rand, that's the maximum. We can't stretch ourselves beyond this and be able to stick to the commitment. So what else can we do? What else can we maneuver in order to achieve our goal? Well, we need to go higher up the risk curve. In other words, we need to invest in instruments that have more exposure to growth assets, so that our return, is more than this 9%, or our money is working harder for us than the traditional unit trust or balance fund kind of investment. So let's look at a higher risk kind of fund, which, one of them would be a Coronation Global Managed Fund, which invests pretty much all of the assets offshore. But it's a South African based fund. As I mentioned, we're not going to go into, the technicalities of the funds and so on. If you're interested in that, you can let me know, and I'll be happy to make a separate video on this. But if we look at the returns of this fund in Rand terms, we can see that it's done a lot better. That's over a 10-year period, 14.3% of annualized growth over 10 years, but still underperformed the benchmark. And if we go back to our calculation and put in, let's say the 14%, let's increase that to 14 and see how much of an improvement we have from this. And you see it was 153 at 9%, but at 14%, our money is working harder. Okay, we've got an extra 30,000 or so that we are able to generate just by investing in an instrument that produces a greater return over the long term. But that's still well short of what we need, because remember here, this is just for one child's education, and the likelihood is that you have more than one child, or you will have more than one child, and therefore you will need a lot more than this if you want to give your child the kind of education that you want for them. So again, we need to look at other instruments besides the traditional instruments, which can give us the kind of return that we need. Another instrument that I mentioned earlier is the cryptocurrency. Now, one of the more popular cryptocurrency funds available here in South Africa. Of course, you can buy cryptocurrency, anywhere using a regulated exchange. But, this one is available through one of the popular exchanges, which is Easy Equity. This is the EC10 cryptocurrency fund, which invests in the top 10 cryptocurrencies by market capitalization. So it's like a unit trust, which, it derives its value from the performance of the underlying assets which it invests in. And in this fund, the underlying assets are these top 10 cryptocurrencies, with the biggest weighting being in Bitcoin. So if we look at the performance of this fund, of course it's a lot more volatile because it's newer, and the prices fluctuates quite drastically, particularly over the short term. But here we are investing over the long term, and as the fund suggests, you need to have a 5-year plus time horizon, ideally, to really benefit from this fund. And fortunately, for the purposes of investing in education, we have a 7-year time horizon. So this could be ideal for us if you are obviously an investor that is not risk averse, and so you are not easily concerned by drastic market movement, which requires you to increase your knowledge and skill. Because if you are investing in this kind of instrument and you don't really understand how it works, when you see a 40% drop in the price of this asset, the likelihood is that you're going to want to disinvest because you don't know what's going on, and this is the largest downfall for many novice investors. They invest in things they don't understand, and they will sell when prices drop, and they will get excited when prices go up, and they will want to invest. Warren Buffett made the comment that the stock market is the only place where people will want to sell stuff when they go on sale. So when shares or whatever go on sale, you want to sell them. Ideally you want to buy stuff when it goes on sale, but not typical in the stock market. So as you can see here, the year-to-date return for this instrument is negative 30%. We're not interested in the short-term performance. We're interested in the longer-term performance. You see the 1-year return, you said the 2-year return. Ideally, you'd want a investment vehicle that has at least a 5-year or longer track record, so that you can, ideally 10 years, so that you can be able to see how it behaves in various market cycles. Fortunately, Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency on its own has more than 10-year track record, which it has delivered on average over almost 200% per annum since its inception in 2009 as an investment vehicle. So if we look at this cryptocurrency fund, this is a Bitwise Bitcoin fund. This is domiciled in the US, and you can invest in Bitcoin directly. You don't have to go through an exchange or a company or whatever it is, just through a regulated exchange, which I can leave again a link in the description below of those that are quite reputable here in South Africa. So let's look at this fund. It invests all its assets in Bitcoin. And again, looking over the long term, since this fund's inception, it's generated over 1,000%. Over the past 12 months, Bitcoin on its own has done 57%. I guess the difference there is the fees that the fund charges, which make the return lower. So let's say, for argument's sake, you were to invest in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, as I said, over the past 10 years plus has generated about just under 200% per annum. And let's argue that you could in future be able to generate 55% per annum on average for the next 7 years as you are investing for your child's education. Let's look at what that return would look like. Okay, so you still have the same amount, 1,000 Rand a month. You'll still, increase it annually by 10%. And yeah, you're investing it for 7 years. And we said that, this investment vehicle can generate 55% per annum. Let's look at what our return. Wow. This looks unreal and unbelievable. But the reality is, had you been invested in Bitcoin over the past, 7 years, and you were putting this kind of money, you'd probably have at least 10 times, if not more, this amount. In fact, yeah, you'd probably be, I've done the calculation, you're probably sitting on about 50, 60 million rands if you were to have been putting this a month over the past 7 years. But of course, past performance doesn't necessarily mean that will hold through for the future. But at least we understand, based on the fundamentals of the assets, how they are likely to perform in future. And again, like I said, it requires you to upskill yourself so that you understand the nature of the asset, how it behaves, so that you are not swayed or concerned when there are drastic market movements or corrections. However, if you are not that inclined, then obviously this is not a vehicle that you should be invested in, which is cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. If you're someone who is risk averse, you are very conservative, and you worry so much, when prices shift radically, then investing in that kind of asset would not be ideal for you. You would be much rather suited to something like a balanced fund from Alan Gray or Coronation, or any of the more popular investment unit trust funds. Here's another one by Insignia, which is also a fairly new unit trust fund, which invests in offshore assets as well. If you look at the performance of this fund, annualized over the past year, it was 28%. So this is not yet, doesn't have yet track record of longer than 5 years. And I've said you'd want ideally a fund that has a 10-year or longer track record, so you can see how this fund manager is able to adapt to changing market conditions and so on. But so far it's looking very promising. I mean, over the 3-year track record, it's delivered 42% of compounded growth per annum, which is quite exceptional. So as a long-term investor, this is something that would be well suited for your objectives, because we have at least a 7-year time horizon. I hope this video has helped you determine which investment vehicle can potentially help you to save enough for your child to enable them to achieve the best education possible. If you found value in this video, then please like, share, and comment below letting me know what you liked about it. And if you'd like to receive more videos like this from me, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell.